When you think of the Bible, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For most of us, it's a spiritual guide, a book of faith. But what if I told you it might also be one of the most practical business manuals ever created? Today, we're looking at the Bible through a totally different lens, as a serious contender for the world's oldest business ledger.
I mean, look at this. On one side, you have these powerful, dramatic stories we all know, right? Like Abraham and Isaac, tales of faith and morality. But then you flip to the back and you get this. These incredibly dense, almost boring-looking tables of measures, weights, and coins. It's kind of like finding an Excel spreadsheet in the middle of an epic poem.
And that's the big question we're digging into in this explainer. What is all this practical, commercial data doing in a book of faith? Was it just some random appendix, or is it absolutely essential to the book's purpose, and maybe even the secret to how it's spread across the entire world? All right, let's follow the clues.
Okay, our first piece of evidence is hiding in plain sight in what looks like a simple index. But trust me, it's way more than that. It's like a meticulously kept ledger of history, tracking the rise and fall of the ancient world's biggest players.
So, tucked away in the back of this Bible is this chronological index, and the level of detail is just wild. This isn't just a list of who begat whom. No, it's a precise timeline of secular history. We're talking the reigns of kings, the outcomes of major battles, and the shifting borders of empires.
And what's really fascinating is how it zeroes in on the superpower of the day, Rome. It records the exact moment Pompey takes Jerusalem, which effectively brings the whole region under Roman control. It notes when Julius Caesar becomes dictator, and then when Augustus grabs absolute power. This isn't mythology. This is a real-time political briefing on the ruling empire, which is absolutely essential info if you're trying to survive, let alone do business.
And just listen to the language here. It's not poetic. It's not theological. It reads like a state record or an intelligence report. For anyone living back then, this wasn't just interesting trivia. This was critical intel about who was in charge, who you owed your taxes to, and whose laws you had to obey.
Okay, so the book is tracking political power. Got it. But now let's look at our next clue, which is basically an ancient pocket calculator designed for doing business in that exact Roman Empire.
All right, just imagine this for a second. You're a merchant in Judea. You've just sold a bunch of goods, and your pouch is full of local shekels. Great. But the tax collector is Roman, and he wants his cut in denarii. So, what do? How do you figure out the conversion? How do you make sure you're not getting ripped off?
Well, the answer might be right there in your holy book. These tables are, for all intents and purposes, a universal converter for the ancient world. They're an absolutely essential tool for anyone who needs to trade, pay taxes, or just figure out what anything is worth under Roman rule.
And look how specific this is. This isn't some vague reference, it's hard data. You can see the exact breakdown for Roman money, all valued in pence and farthings. You could literally not conduct business across the Roman Empire without a guide like this. This simple table turns a spiritual text into a vital financial tool.
And the level of detail is just astonishing. A single talent, which was a massive unit of value, is broken down into precisely 3,000 shekels. That isn't a ballpark figure. That's the kind of precision you need for huge contracts, for paying armies, or for calculating the entire wealth of a kingdom. This is the language of commerce, plain and simple. So we have the political timelines, we have the economic data. The third and final clue completes the toolkit. It's all about logistics, and it's hiding in the Bible's maps. And let me tell you, these maps show a lot more than just the journeys of apostles.
So at first glance, yeah, this is a map of the Apostle Paul's travels. But look closer at the routes. They perfectly trace the major shipping lanes and trade arteries of the Eastern Mediterranean, all controlled by the Roman Empire. These weren't just paths for spreading faith. They were the highways of ancient commerce.
And it's not just sea routes either. This other map details the critical overland territories of Assyria, Armenia, and Syria. Now, why these places? Well, because they were the essential land bridge that connected the Mediterranean world to all those lucrative trade routes coming from the east. This is basically a map of the ancient global supply chain.
So if you look at these maps like a merchant would, they give you everything you need. We're talking key ports for shipping, major cities for markets, the best overland routes, the political borders you have to cross, and even the mountains and deserts you need to get around. It's a complete logistical toolkit. So when we step back and put all these clues together, the history, the economics, the logistics, the Bible starts to look really, really different. It's not just a collection of stories anymore. It's a comprehensive guide to surviving and thriving in its time.
The political timelines, the economic conversion tables, and the logistical maps, they all add up to something incredibly powerful, a practical, indispensable guide to navigating the ancient world. You have to remember, in an era before the internet or GPS, a single book that contained all of this data would have been unbelievably valuable.
So maybe we need a new name for this. We could call it a trading Bible, a text that was perhaps constantly updated, not just with spiritual insights, but with the hard, practical data you needed to do business, to pay your taxes, and to travel safely across the massive Roman Empire and beyond.
And that brings us to one last big idea to chew on. We always ask why the ideas in the Bible spread so far, so wide. What if part of the answer isn't just in its spiritual message, but in its practical usefulness? Could it be that all this data, the timelines, the money tables, the maps, was the essential software that allowed its spiritual code to be successfully installed across the entire known world? Something to think about.